You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson. So I am sitting here so excited to record this episode of the podcast because the subject matter is something that it's not that it's just important to me, but it actually has changed my life, and it informs who I am. It informs how this life is lived. It informs how I deal with suffering. It informs how I perceive all of life, not just, the moments that are tougher, but all of life. And it is an opportunity for me to convey some deeply spiritual concepts and philosophies, and to try and do it in a way that is as approachable and user-friendly as possible. Because, as many of you may already know, I don't like to lecture or teach or even refer to anything that I don't know is true, anything that I haven't applied myself and found it to be beneficial. And when you do this kind of work, when you teach very abstract concepts, and when you are in environments where very abstract concepts are thrown around very often, it can be awfully easy to just regurgitate what someone else has said without having any practical application or understanding of this concept. And so I don't like to talk about or refer to or to teach. Of course, I'm not going to teach anything that I don't know is true. But this I do know is true. And because the nature of it is so abstract and is so foreign to the way that we all live our lives today, I think it is all the more important for me to discuss it. And I think it's a responsibility that I take very seriously to talk to you about it, to elucidate the issue, the subject matter, and to give you something from this topic that you potentially didn't have before you tuned in to this episode. Initially, I wanted to title this episode of the podcast, Identifying Who We Are. And then I recorded it. I think it was something like a 20-minute recording that I did, and I wasn't satisfied with it. So I didn't scrap it, but I put it into a folder where the unpublished recordings go. And then I made some notes and said to myself, you know what, it needs to be re-recorded, and it can't be called Identifying Who We Are. It needs to be called The Most Important Work We Could Ever Do. And it is the most important work we could ever do, because what I want to talk to you about is how we identify ourselves, what we identify ourselves as being. Now, I have always been the type of person who didn't trust people when they told me what type of person they were. That's the truth. I heard myself say what I just said, and I thought, oh man, I have such an issue when people say that. But let me share this with you. I have always been that person who is always looking to the next thing. I'm the type of person who believes in a world of infinite possibilities. And because I believe in infinite possibilities, and because I have the fundamental belief that we will always be okay, that we will always land on our feet, that I will always land on my feet, it can be a heady combination to believe in endless possibilities and to know that I will be okay. It creates the breeding ground for incredible things to happen. But the shadow side of that is that I can also be very guilty of not being aware of what is right in front of me and appreciating what is right in front of me and feeling gratitude, having real gratitude for those things. So part of my daily spiritual practice is to be present and to be aware of the blessings, for lack of a better term, that have been bestowed upon me, because, I could easily have found myself born on another side of the planet, struggling to survive, crossing countries in search of safety and, freedom. And that is not the case. So I am aware of that, and I am grateful for that. But nonetheless, I do have moments, well, not moments, I have lived a majority of my life trying to think up the next big goal, the next big accomplishment, the next big thing for me. I like to feel challenged. I would like to think that there is ambition, and ultimately I like to do all of these things so that they are available for other people. And that's really the truth. I want other people to experience greatness, and I want other people to experience those moments where you touch beauty in a way that you rarely do, and it makes you so grateful to be alive in these bodies. And I think that that's really what life should be. Life should be these moments that make you just vibrate with the gratitude of being alive to have experienced it. Because ultimately I believe that when we experience these moments, they reflect back to us what we naturally are, who we naturally are. They reflect back to us aspects of ourselves that we rarely see reflected back from the world around us. And so when we do, it's a rare moment, and it's a moment to be appreciated. But let me bring it back a bit. I've always been that person who is looking at the next thing, looking at potentially what I don't have but can create. And I have been told by people in the past that I will never be satisfied, that I'll never find satisfaction. And typically I've been told this by people who are not like this, who are very happy with whatever they have, and as long as things are stable, things are good. And there's a part of me that envies that, but I also know that that is not my nature. And so this experience of life for me is really a series of, okay, what's next? But let me not lose sight of what is directly in front of me. Now, in a world where we have been set up to interpret experience, to interpret life through the senses, through the five senses, it would only make sense to believe that what we are searching for, if you are like I am and you are a seeker and you are looking at a world of infinite possibilities, it would only be normal that you are looking outside of yourself for whatever that next big thing is. And the truth is that when you do find that next big thing, when it does become reality, when you make it manifest, it is thrilling for a certain amount of time, but it has a shelf life. And once that shelf life has, expired, it becomes commonplace. We get used to things very, very quickly. And as Sadhguru once said, once you have come as a human being, survival isn't good enough. If your stomach is empty, there's only one issue: food. But once the stomach becomes full, you have 100 issues going on. The nature of the human being is such. No matter what you do, you want to be something more than what you are right now. And if that something more happens, again, you will want something more. It's an endless pursuit. So those words from Sadhguru really, really resonated with me. And they really started me thinking about, how do I reconcile the seeking in a world where there will always be something else to seek? Because ultimately that means that I'm in an endless pursuit, that this nature of mine is such that I will constantly always be looking for what I don't have. Now, let's partner that whole side of things into the spiritual understanding that I live by. That spiritual understanding is that I am not this body. I am not this voice. I am not my name. I'm not my gender. I'm not anything that the outside world would recognize me by. The Brahmness, for lack of a better term, is not what I am or who I am. Spiritually speaking, we are taught through Hinduism that there is one source energy that animates all things. This energy is referred to as Brahman, and I don't believe in coincidences, but I was not named Brahm after Brahman, but here we are. And ultimately, that energy animates all that is. And this energy in these bodies has landed in these bodies at this moment in time with all the resources available to these bodies so that it can use these bodies. It can use these eyes to see through, and it can use this nose to smell through, and use this mouth to eat and to verbalize, communicate into the world. It uses these ears to hear. It uses this body to move through and to sense and to feel. I believe that this energy that animates this body, that is embodied by the Brahmness, if you will, that is what I am. And when I understand that, all of a sudden I find myself no longer needing to seek as vehemently and as rabidly as I have in the external world. I don't feel the need to look for the next thing because I find this sense of peace from understanding myself to be this nature, this seat of personality, this consciousness, whatever you want to call it. When I look at a group of people, when I am outside of my home, when I see anything around me, including the animals, my dog, these pigeons that have been nesting on the balcony over here, I see different waves in the same ocean. I see different forms animated by the same vibration of being. And I understand commonality. I understand that what animates all of that animates this Brahmness, and that it is all the same. And this is something that if you would have spoken to me about 5 or 10 years ago, I would have been completely confused and probably would have just nodded pleasantly and politely and walked away. But I really need to express how vital this belief of mine is, this knowing of mine is. Because what it has done is affect my entire experience. Whereas typically I would need to shift tension. Let's say when I'm driving and I find the drivers around me not working in a collaborative way with me, which is never going to happen, obviously. Older versions of me would have been frustrated, would have called people names, would have driven aggressively. And while that trigger potentially still can happen, what I have found myself responding to recently is, recognizing in the others who are driving their vehicles and in the vehicles themselves, just different peaks of the same consciousness. It all is. I just look and I think, my God, it's just another expression of that energy. When I'm teaching yoga and occasionally there are, insects in the studio, something crawling up the wall, something flying around, a spider, whatever. Whereas older versions of me would have seen these things and probably thought, oh, I need to kill it. I need to remove it from the environment. All of a sudden, I just see it as another manifestation of being. And it is such a dramatic shift for me. And it changes everything. Older versions of me, when I would then have thought I had gotten sick, would identify with that illness. So if I caught a cold, I would think I'm sick, and I would say I'm sick. And then years ago, after I gave a yoga retreat in Istanbul, I went to Amsterdam and subsequently got really bad food poisoning. And when gradually, everything started to come out, and I'm not going to go into detail, but when that happened, I remember this voice in my, I don't know, I want to say in my mind, but it wasn't in my mind. But I felt this voice. I heard this voice just say, as I was being sick, wow, there's a lot of sickness. And right there, the verbiage changed. The inner dialogue changed. It wasn't, I am so sick. I am a victim. All of a sudden it was, wow, look at the sickness. It's been so long. I don't even remember when there's been this much sickness. all of a sudden I find myself as this observing energy, observing the changing landscape of life, using this body, this Brahmness, to interact with that changing landscape, to express itself into that changing landscape, to leave its mark in that changing landscape, and ultimately to uplift everybody else in that changing landscape so that they can understand that they are not the changing landscape. They are the energy that engages with it, that observes it, that hears it through the ears of whoever's body. It is such an abstract thing to try and explain to you, but I think that if you can wrap your brain around this concept, it can be life-changing, because it has been for me. Now, let me just disclaimer this whole thing by saying that if what I'm talking about is way too dense and way too abstract for you and you're not into it, I get it. It doesn't matter if you are on board with what I'm talking about spiritually. What is vitally important to everyone is that we understand that this root of spirituality is the root of certain psychotherapeutic beliefs and philosophies. If you are able to observe life, your experience of life, if you are able to observe it without personalizing it all, if you are able to be at work and see the drama and have someone say something to you that previously would have landed as insulting or hurtful, but not personalize it to the point where you feel insulted or hurt, but you're simply seeing that this is what is going on right now in the dance of life in front of you, it is going to dramatically change the quality of your experience of life. I believe that the meaning of life is to not take it all so seriously. I believe that the meaning of life is to stay connected to all the incredible stuff in the presence of all of the other stuff that could pull us away. Because what the truth is that it is all occurring simultaneously. There are opposites arising in any given moment. You can be having horrible things occur, but beautiful, incredible things are just a thought away. You just would have to redirect the mind. The Bhagavad Gita talks to us or tells us that we are all the one-pointed practitioner, which means that because the mind can only focus on one thing at a time, it is a practice to direct that mind to what will make this experience of life more of what we need it to be. Which means that we are no longer being yanked around by the drama, by the daily drama. It's not about just surviving and getting through it all. It is about having perspective and being able to redirect the mind when we need to, so that we're not walking around riddled with contraction in the body, riddled with tension. We can alleviate that tension because we can remember that there is beauty in any given moment, even in the presence of horror. These are tools that apparently are ancient. I wasn't there, I can't really vouch for it, but what I can tell you today, now, is that they are incredibly helpful for me in this journey of life. I have professionally coached and mentored people who previously had identified not as this energy, but as their bodies, as their jobs, as their relationships, as their role as mother or father, brother, sister, whatever. And the ultimate danger about identifying with these external factors is that what happens when these external factors change or are taken away? What happens when you lose your job? If you are someone who has identified yourself as the job that you do, what happens when that job goes? If you are a parent who identified as a mother or father, and all of a sudden your children have left the house and you are left without your children living with you, obviously you're still a parent, but that empty nest syndrome is a real thing. Who are you if your kids move out? Who are you as a son or daughter when a parent passes away or both parents pass away, and all of a sudden you find yourself feeling orphaned? Ultimately, the hardest thing to deal with in all these scenarios is that re-identification of self. We have identified ourselves as being something or someone for so long based on the external factor that bounced back our purpose to us, that when that external factor changes or is removed, the equation, circle doesn't fit the square. We're lost. This re-identification of self from external to internal is vital. I've said it many times and I'll continue to say it as long as this body is. But if you are looking for whatever you think is going to make you happier or more satisfied with the experience of life, and you are looking outside of yourself, you're looking at external factors to make that happen, you better think again, because you are going to be hardcore disappointed over and over and over and over again. It is going to be an endless pursuit of chasing a dangling carrot that is always out of reach. And there will be disappointment, endless. If you understand that what you are looking for exists within you, and I know this is such a hallmark moment, and it's such an abstract thing to say, but if you can understand or grasp the concept that what you're looking for lies within you, it just requires a shift in perspective, a shift in understanding. Whew, relief. It means that you don't need to rely on the external world for whatever you believe you need or want more of. It simply requires you to seek within, to explore spiritual pathways that perhaps were not available to you in the past. This energy in the body, without getting too deeply into it, has the capacity to love. It has the capacity to be compassionate, and it is made up of something called discriminative wisdom. Discriminative wisdom means that no matter what it encounters, no matter what this energy that animates the body you find yourself in, no matter what that energy encounters, it can handle. It can deal with it. And not just like survive it, but deal with it landing on your feet, proverbially speaking, and continue marching forward in hope, in light, in good. Imagine we all identified ourselves as this energy, loving, compassionate, and wise, being able to handle anything. Where in that equation is there room for fear? There may be a little bit, but you know what? Compared to the amount of space that we afford for fear in these lives, these one-dimensional, life exists through the five senses lives that we live today, what a contrast. We need to live fearlessly. We need to jump beyond fear. We need to stay as connected to hope and faith as possible. And I'm not saying faith in anything religious or spiritual. I'm not asking you to get on board with that. I'm simply explaining my reality as I know it. But I'm saying if we have the opportunity to make our lives better by working with our own minds, working with our own thoughts, working with our own beliefs, then why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we teach children that they can do that? So that all of a sudden their realities are not informed by the fear of not being accepted, of not being loved, of not fitting in, of not dressing right. All that stuff would go out the window. We would understand that every single one of us has an energy that has landed in this body right now for a reason. Call it dharma, call it purpose, but it's happening on purpose. It is intentional. We are all here to do this work that I'm talking about so that we can then share it and be of service to each other. Because as I've said in previous podcasts, the only thing that we're not doing in today's world is taking care of each other, and it's the most important one. Because instead of seeing all of the things that typically divide us, instead of interpreting everybody as different because the packaging looks different, the bodies look different, the gods we pray to seem different, we are completely missing the mark. We're not seeing that everyone is animated by that same energy, and that energy is not affected by what God you pray to. It is not affected by skin tone or sexual orientation or any of those accidents of life. It simply is animating this specific body right now to move itself through the world, to express itself, and to do this work, this practice. It is a blessing for me to talk about this. I'm so grateful that I can put it into words. I'm so grateful that I feel that I am not only in the process of self-realization, but I can express this self-realization so that it can be something that is bigger than just me, because it is bigger than just me. This is your journey as well. You are hearing these words. You may think that they are coming from without, and maybe they are, but once you hear them, they are now a part of you. They exist within your awareness for a reason. I don't believe in accidents. I don't believe you have listened to this for nothing. I think that it is meant to leave you with something that you didn't have before this episode of the podcast started. So your homework is to observe. I want you to go into, let's say, the next 24 hours. That's the default I always fall back on. Go into the next 24 hours from now with the intention of simply observing your experience of life as if you're watching a movie. It's happening outside of you. There will be moments where you get emotionally involved. There are ups, there are downs. Sometimes you cry, sometimes you laugh. Sometimes you get involved and start yelling at the screen. But I want you to observe all of it without personalizing. Stop taking it personally. It has nothing to do with you. It is not about you. It is happening in front of you. Observe it. And I want you to notice what that changes for you. I would love to hear about whatever your experiences are. So feel free to find me online somewhere and let me know. Give it a go. Have fun with it. And I'll see you later. This has been the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.